This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Property damaged as Cyclone Eloise hits Mozambique's Beira. Egypt begins COVID-19 vaccination campaign. And Tunisia reopens schools after a week's closure amid COVID-19. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also ahead on the program. In business news, conspiracy theories around 5G technology lead to torching of 2 towers in South Africa. And in sports, CAF bans Football Kenya Federation CEO for withholding the national team's COVID-19 results. And we start off in Mozambique, where a tropical cyclone Eloise has hit the port city of Beira. The cyclone, which is characterized by strong winds, heavy rainfall and fog, has caused flooding in the capital of the Sofala region, destroying homes and electricity lines. The Red Cross has warned that the cyclone would displace at least 100,000 people. The Mozambique National Institute of Meteorology says the region has received 200 millimeters of rainfall and predicts another 100 millimeters in the next 24 hours. The World Meteorological Organization had on Friday said the cyclone brought hurricanes that had maximum wind speeds of 154 to 177 kilometers per hour. It also said that heavy rains are expected in South Africa's Mpumalanga and KwaZulu-Natal provinces and in the Kingdom of Eswatini by Monday. The city of Beira was the epicenter of Cyclone Idai that occurred in March of 2019. It left about 1,300 people dead and many more missing. To Egypt now, where President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has announced that vaccinations against COVID-19 will start on Sunday. He said that priority will be given to health workers. The North African nation had received its first consignment of vaccines from China's Sinopharm Group in December. Egypt's health minister last week said the country will get 40 million doses through the Gavi Vaccine Alliance to inoculate 20% of the Egyptian population. Well, let's cross over to CGTN's Adel Mahroui. He's in Ismailia City in Egypt. He's now joining us with more details. Adel, what is the latest on the vaccination rollout?
Well, we're waiting here at any time now the arrival of Health Minister Hala Zayed, who is going to inaugurate or officially launch the beginning of the COVID-19 vaccination process in Egypt. It will start here, as you said, in Ismailia City. This is one of the COVID-19 specialized treatment hospitals, and Egypt is starting with the medical staff in hospitals like these across the country. After that, the vaccination will be available in about 34 vaccination centers across the country in every single governorship to spread the vaccination process as much as possible across the country.
Adel, so the government will start with the frontline workers and then get on with the rollout. What is the timeline, though, for the vaccination exercise?
Well, there hasn't been an official timeline announced yet, Beatrice. However, Egypt is still trying to put its hands on as much vaccination as possible. Already there is an ongoing announcement, at least by the Egyptian Health Ministry, about the contracts and negotiations with China's Sinopharm, which vaccine is going to be the first to be rolled out here in Egypt to secure 14 million doses to Egypt, and that will cover, of course, each person will get 2 doses within 21 days, so that secures about 20 million Egyptians. That's 20% of the population. Also, Egypt is has ongoing negotiations with 2 pharmaceutical companies to secure the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, also for another 14 million doses to cover another 20 million Egyptians, and also the Gavi international organization that is responsible for the vaccination distribution across the world. Egypt is still in negotiation with it to secure COVID-19 vaccines, most of which, according to the health ministry, will also be the Oxford AstraZeneca. But when will these vaccines arrive. That's the key point, that the government has not announced and cannot actually plan its vaccination program until these doses have at least arrived in the country.
All right, Adil Mahouri joining us there from Ismailia in Egypt. Thank you. Now, as high-income countries roll out mass vaccination programs, African countries are also making efforts to secure vaccines for their populations. The African Union has a deal in place to procure 270 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines from member states. The move complements the COVAX facility, a World Health Organization and Gavi Vaccine Alliance initiative to help low and middle-income countries access vaccines fairly and equitably. CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa tells us more.
In December 2020, the West African nation of Guinea began administering coronavirus vaccines, making it among the first on the African continent to roll out the vaccines. The exercise was conducted using Sputnik V, a Russian-produced vaccine that medics administered on an experimental basis. To date, only 25 people in Guinea, mostly government officials, have received it. The National Agency for Health and Safety says the country will assess whether to extend the vaccinations to other regions after the pilot phase. Now, Seychelles has also started vaccinating its population against COVID-19 with doses from China's Sinopharm vaccine. The country received 50,000 doses of the vaccine as a donation from the United Arab Emirates. India's government has also offered Seychelles another 100,000 doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine due to arrive at the end of January. In North Africa, Morocco has received 2 million doses of AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine. This makes it the first country on the African continent to get a large enough shipment to start rolling out a nationwide free immunization program. Morocco's free vaccination campaign is now set to start on the last week of January. The country has placed orders for 66 million doses of vaccines, 25 million of the AstraZeneca vaccine and the remainder with China's Sinopharm vaccine. Now, Egypt received 50,000 doses of the vaccine in December from its close ally, the United Arab Emirates. It has also received legislative approval to produce the Chinese Sinovac coronavirus vaccine locally. Various African countries are making the effort to secure vaccines, but hoarding by wealthy nations, funding shortfalls, and cold chain requirements have slowed the process of rolling out the vaccines across Africa. The People's Vaccine Alliance found that rich nations, representing just 14% of the world's population, had bought 53% of all the most promising vaccines. As the World Health Organization calls for global equitable access to the COVID-19 vaccines, the African Union has secured a deal to procure 270 million of the vaccines for its member states. The order, to be supplied by Pfizer, AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson, means at least 50 million doses will be available between April and June 2021. The vaccines will be allocated on the continental platform the AU set up to make it easier for Africa's 54 countries to pool their purchasing power and buy pandemic supplies in bulk.
Nigeria's president has approved the release of nearly $15 million for the setting up of new oxygen production plants. In a statement, President Muhammadu Buhari said that the move is necessary as the country faces a surge in COVID-19 cases. CGTN's Deji Badmus now reports.
The decision to build the oxygen production plants follows complaints from the country's presidential task force on COVID-19 that the number of patients in isolation centers requiring treatment with oxygen is growing rapidly as the country records a spike in infection rates. COVID-19 related deaths in Nigeria, which currently stand at over 1,400, have also been on the rise, and this has been attributed to inadequate oxygen supplies at isolation centers. Now, earlier in Lagos, which is the epicenter of the outbreak, the governor of the state said demand for oxygen at one of its main treatment centers has gone up from 70 cylinders per day to 360 daily. Now, this is expected to more than double by the end of January.
The state government has decentralized the availability of oxygen across the state through the provision of 10 oxygen and sampling kiosks. This oxygen therapy and other related services will be provided to patients that require them.
The state government has since commissioned an oxygen production plant in the city, with 2 more expected in the coming days. So the one that will be set up here by federal authorities will complement those built by the state government. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
The U.S. National Institute of Health says it is too soon to say that a COVID-19 variant that first emerged in the UK is more deadly. This comes after the British government warned it may increase mortality rates, while the Prime Minister's chief scientific advisor cautioned that the data was still preliminary. Guy Henderson reports from London.
On Friday, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson made clear that, particularly in light of data suggesting that the new variant of the coronavirus originating in the UK late last year could be more deadly than previous strains. 3 things, he said, were going to have to happen before there could be any consideration of beginning to ease restrictions. The very first one of those was more confidence in the UK's vaccine rollout. Now, according to the latest figures, 10% or so of the population have now received their first jab. The British Medical Association, though, has expressed its concerns about the current government strategy of giving as many people as possible their first dose before beginning to administer the second. The government's argument on this has always been that it is better to give partial immunity to a larger section of the population than it is to give a higher amount of immunity to a smaller number of people. The BMA's chairman, Chand Nagpal, had this to say about that strategy, specifically when it came to the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine.
So we know that there is evidence for giving the second dose of up to 42 days. So what we did and what I wrote to the chief medical officer to reconsider the decision in the UK, looking at that guidance from the WHO, but also taking stock of the fact that no other nation in the world has adopted the 12-week delay like the UK.
Secondly, the Prime Minister said he also wanted more data on variants which are originating and emerging in other parts of the world. There is concern that they might make their way to the United Kingdom and potentially undermine that vaccine effort. And that is why on Monday, the British government is going to be discussing new border restrictions, beefing up the border, potentially including a requirement for all new arrivals to carry out their quarantine period inside a hotel, essentially so they don't travel as far and so it is easier to keep an eye on them. That then makes the third factor that Prime Minister Johnson talked about all the more important, that is driving those numbers right down as far as possible to the point where the British system would then be in a better position to deal with the arrival of any further new variants, could quickly identify them and essentially shut them down. Guy Henderson, CGTN, London.
Lawmakers in the Democratic Republic of Congo have filed a motion of no confidence in Prime Minister Sylvester Lukamba. The motion is part of President Felix Tshisekedi's move to force out a cabinet dominated by allies of his predecessor Joseph Kabila. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa has more from Kinshasa.
More than 300 MPs signed the motion of no confidence in Prime Minister Sylvester Lukamba. The motion gives the Prime Minister 48 hours to resign, failure to which he'll be voted out of office. One of the MPs told CGTN that the move is aimed at forcing the current government to collapse in order to hand President Felix Tshisekedi a majority in government. Mr. Lukamba is an ally of former DRC President Joseph Kabila, whose party had a majority in parliament after the 2018 elections. But last December, President Tshisekedi ended the ruling coalition he formed with Joseph Kabila and said he'll form a new political outfit known as the Sacred Union. He's already convinced some MPs from Kabila's coalition to join his camp. The president can only form his new political outfit once the Prime Minister resigns or gets a no-confidence vote. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Tunisians have been taking to the streets in the capital Tunis for more than a week now. The protesters decry alleged police brutality, unemployment and inequality. The riots are in defiance to a ban on demonstrations by the government last week, leading to a clash between the youth protesters and the police. The protests take place amid the coronavirus pandemic. The government said the ban on demonstrations was to avoid the spread of the virus. Pirates have kidnapped 15 sailors and killed one person after attacking a Turkish ship off the West African coast. The Turkish Maritime Directorate reported that the Saturday incident took place after a 6-hour struggle by the pirates to access the MV Mozambique ship. The deceased has been identified as engineer Farman Ismailov of Azerbaijan nationality. The Turkish news agency says the pirates abandoned the vessel after abductions, leaving it in the Gulf of Guinea. The International Maritime Bureau says the Gulf of Guinea is the most notorious pirates zone in the world. The ship was headed to Cape Town, South Africa from Lagos, Nigeria. At the time of the attack, the ship is reported to have been some 185 nautical miles northwest of Sao Tome and Principe. 10 Turkish seamen were attacked in July 2019 and released a month later. And now let's get the latest on the gold mine rescue operation in eastern China. 11 miners have now been rescued after spending 2 weeks underground. They've all been sent to hospital for treatment. 2 were brought to the surface a short while ago. The first miner who was rescued is said to be in a coma. 10 are still missing. Over 600 rescue workers are at the site. 22 men were trapped by an explosion at the gold mine, some 600 meters underground in Shandong province. Before Sunday, contact had been made with only 10 of the miners. 1 miner was confirmed dead this past week.
A breakthrough was made this morning. We cleared debris and discovered an underground cavity, thus solving the biggest problem in the rescue. We will be able to bring up the injured people who were found down there. In fact, the seriously injured people have been brought up and taken to the hospital. The rescue team has had a meeting and decided to give priority to those who are seriously injured according to their condition.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. Tunisia reopens schools after a week's closure amid COVID-19. And the US president reaches out to Mexico and Canada.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent, to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis,
Syria,
Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, this year's International Education Day is being marked on Sunday, January the 24th, in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic that disrupted learning across the world. Tunisia will reopen its schools on this day after closing the institutions for a week to combat a sharp rise in COVID-19 cases. Adnan Chauchi has the details.
Tunisia's Education Ministry decided to merge the second and third terms of schooling, starting from January 4th until the end of the school year. The upcoming holiday after the second term, scheduled for February, was cancelled, but the spring holiday, scheduled for next March, will proceed as planned.
We are deeply concerned about education continuity. Our children must continue learning even during the pandemic. The threat of ignorance is worse than that of the coronavirus. We insist on schools reopening as long as the scientific committee agrees and the epidemiological situation is stable. Otherwise, we'll be forced to shut down schools again and look for alternative ways to teach pupils.
Many schools across Tunisia have launched online platforms and opted for e-learning during the second wave of the pandemic. However, hundreds of thousands of children, especially in inner regions, lack access to a computer at home and internet connectivity.
Pupils are acquainted with new technologies. They have been trained on learning through digital platforms since the outbreak of the pandemic. As teachers, we focus on improving skills because online teaching is challenging technically. Unfortunately, many children do not have access to digital platforms. Continued training allows us to adapt to this conventional mode of teaching, which is necessary to save lives.
The Tunisian Association for Education Quality has approved the use of online platforms. Experts in the country have recommended online education systems that allow learners to access materials whenever they need them.
Asynchronous learning is a good solution because digital platforms offer interactive activities. Pupils can study at any time and download material even if the internet connection is weak. This method favors learning individually. Each student can study at his own pace. It's a safe way to learn. It could last for years if the pandemic persists.
According to the Ministry of Education and the National Observatory of New and Emerging Diseases, 5,854 COVID-19 infections, including 32 fatalities, and 4,205 recoveries have been reported in schools since the start of the school year. 2,561 of them are students. 2,595 are teachers, while 698 are educational staff.
Tunisian instructors assert that education has changed dramatically as teaching is undertaken online and on digital platforms. Authorities will launch the first educational satellite channel this week. This educational project will offer distance learning opportunities for all pupils. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Well, I'm now joined by Paul Tonke Keseri, a Senior Manager, Classroom Africa, to further discuss the International Education Day. Paul, thank you for joining us on Africa Live. What exactly is the significance of the International Education Day?
Thank you so much for having me. First of all, it's important for the viewers to note that education is a fundamental human right, just like food, just like shelter. So, and without an access to an equitable and inclusive education, countries will not be able to attain sustainable development, and populations will not be able to break the cycle of poverty that has left millions of children, millions of youth and adults behind. So globally, before the pandemic, more than 258 million children globally were out of school. And even with those numbers that are in school, more than 600 million children and adolescents were not able to read or even do some basic mathematics. So this brings in an aspect of poor quality of education that's being offered across schools globally. At the sub-Saharan Africa, for example, more than a fifth of children between the ages of 6 and 11 were out of school. So this is probably the highest proportion of out-of-school children globally. And so this important day, the International Education Day, being commemorated for the third time globally today, it helps in reminding the international community and the duty bearers of the citizens across the different countries globally that we need to step up solidarity, we need to step up collaboration and partnerships to ensure that by 2030, all children at least, and I'm using at least, complete free primary and secondary education.
So the COVID-19 pandemic has definitely had an adverse effect on learning in 2020 particularly. And you mentioned those numbers of 250 million children out of school in 2020. So how important is the day at this time of the coronavirus pandemic, which has seen many students missing out on schooling over the last year?
Indeed, this day is critical, is very, very important and really timely for us because COVID-19 has led to what we're calling a silent global education crisis that has far longer lasting impact on populations, probably more than COVID itself. I mean, the adverse effects of a population missing an education are irretrievable. During the pandemic, you could have numbers of more than 1.6 billion children, as you've just put it, that who have missed school for more than 1 year now. I mean, and the discovery of the new strains in the virus, who knows? There's a possibility of probably learning institutions remaining closed for more than 1 year or more. So with this year's theme of the International Education Day, which brings in the aspect of trying to recover and revitalize education for COVID-19 generations, there is need to improve ICT infrastructure across countries to promote online learning, there's need to improve the state in the learning institutions across countries to help meet the basic requirements in terms of helping to spread the virus. So probably having additional shelters in school, improving the sanitation facilities in school, and there's also probably need to improve the capacity of the teaching staff, the non-teaching staff to be able to accommodate the new normal. So at this point in time, we are calling upon the donors, well-wishers, development corporations and governments to be able to partner with the rest of the development partners in the efforts to ensuring that our children access an education amidst the pandemic. And I could quote, for instance, organizations like the African Wildlife Foundation, for instance, where I work in, they've been trying to support, through support from the donors, have been trying to support communities and schools that are adjacent to wildlife habitats in Africa, in 8 countries in Africa, to eat that we have access to an education in the midst of COVID for children who are in such vulnerable populations. So if we're able to step up efforts as together across the globe, then we will try to ensure that at least learners are able to access an education with this pandemic.
Talk to us about that new normal, Paul, because you mentioned that the pandemic, the crisis, has exposed some of the loopholes in the education sector. There is need to improve on ICT, for instance, and improve the general state of learning in some schools, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. How do you see the future of education going forward, given the current challenges?
Yes, and I mean, first of all, many children will not return to school. That's a sad state of affairs that we are in, because basically, if I already mentioned the ones that were not in school before COVID. So with COVID in place, we already are trying to look at a situation whereby many children will not return to school. So with that kind of a scenario, especially in low and middle income economies, and especially those ravaged with war and extreme poverty, it calls for the governments and the international community to step up efforts to trying to ensure that children who will be at the risk of dropping out are reached out to, and ensuring that there are available infrastructure to keep the ones that are in school safe. Secondly, distance learning opportunities like education technology, the use of radios, TV, mobile phones, etc., could help in ensuring that there is continuity in learning. However, it will be very, very key also to ensure that while we are trying to do that, we do not create inequalities. We do not exacerbate the learning inequalities that are already happening. So as we bring in the new normal and the new ways of doing things in schools, we should try to ensure that the children from vulnerable populations, the children from the very, very, very poor countries across the globe are also able to attend and have an education even in the midst of this.
All right, Paul Tonke Keseri joining us there via Zoom with that update on education and its challenges. Now, as schools in Wuhan prepare for the upcoming winter vacation, one music teacher is keeping her class busier than ever. She was once active in the fight against COVID-19. Xu Xiaxing pays her a visit.
Huang Yuchun had to follow the news of the spread of COVID-19 even more closely than others. The team of students she led was planning to go to a music festival in Europe at the onset of the outbreak. Then on January 20th, one of China's top health experts issued a warning about the virus, and the music teacher from Wuhan decided to cancel the trip. The lockdown came into effect 3 days later, and Huang realized the virus was very serious, rapidly increasing infections, a shortage of medical supplies, and all public transportation suspended.
The news says some medical workers were having to walk to and from hospital. Giving them a ride was my priority.
Soon an official job came through, and Hua jumped at the opportunity. But she didn't expect the scale of the crisis.
Honestly, it caused me a lot of desperation. If you've done a lot and things can take a turn for the better, you feel ready to fight on. That was the darkest and most suffocating of times, because we worked so hard, but the numbers kept surging.
She says her passengers mostly remained upbeat, but that she had to keep silent once when an ICU nurse broke out crying in the car.
I was speechless when hearing her crying. All I could do was saying to her, "Cheer up," when she got off. "Thank you," she said. "Please take care of yourself." That was an example of empathy and care between two ordinary people.
Another source of strength came from the other volunteers, who came from all walks of life.
Though I felt bad, tired, and scared, being together with such people made you believe you are not fighting alone. Gradually the fear was gone and all of us were willing to help out.
In late February, Hua began volunteering herself as a broadcaster in one of the 16 converted hospitals.
In the beginning, we just played soft music. Soon they requested popular songs for more dancing. On my daily broadcasting script, if there was a notice to any of the recovered, it meant they would be discharged.
The Wuhan teacher Hua Yuchen says Wuhan's people have gained strength through pain. The moment when she welcomed her class back to school, she saw great hope and more performances in store for the city they love. Zhou Jiaxin, CGTN, Wuhan.
U.S. President Joe Biden is reaching out to allies abroad to repair ties that frayed under his predecessor. The conversations come on the heels of a host of executive orders making major shifts in U.S. policy. Meanwhile, reports are surfacing about how former President Donald Trump tried to overturn the presidential election. Toby Muse has more.
Newly elected President Joe Biden has been speaking to neighbors both to the north and to the south. Biden spoke with Mexico's Andrés Manuel López Obrador. They discussed a plan to create new legal pathways for immigration and improve the process for people requesting asylum. They talked about the need to reduce irregular migration. López Obrador welcomed Biden's decision to halt the construction of a wall along the U.S.-Mexican border.
If President Biden says that a wall is no longer being built, that's what he means. In 4 years, 0. That's what he committed to, and I celebrate that decision.
Biden also spoke with Canada's Justin Trudeau. They talked about working together to confront the coronavirus crisis. Trudeau said he was disappointed with Biden's decision to scrap the Keystone XL oil pipeline that would run from Canada to the US over environmental concerns. The Canadian company that owns the pipeline has said the decision will put more than 1,000 people out of work. Trudeau said that Biden's values in general are more aligned with his own, and he looks forward to working with the new president. Former President Donald Trump is facing his trial in the Senate. The Senate will hear the first arguments on February the 9th. He is facing a trial for what Democrats say was his role in inciting a mob to storm the Capitol, a day of violence that left 5 dead. Democrats started the impeachment process confident that they could successfully convict the president. Now hopes are dimming that the 17 Republicans needed will vote to convict Trump. The New York Times is reporting this weekend that while president, after the election, Donald Trump considered firing the acting Attorney General Jeffrey A. Rosen and replacing him with someone who would then use the Department of Justice's power to force Georgia state lawmakers to overturn its presidential election results. The New York Times reported that Trump also demanded special counsels to investigate his claims of fraud in November's election. The newspaper is reporting that Trump did not go through with his plan to fire the acting Attorney General only after a number of lawyers threatened to quit if he did. Toby Muse reporting for CGTN, Washington.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. Conservationists may soon have the ability to use conspiracy theories around 5G C2 towers torched in South Africa. And a Tunisian startup offers real-time urban transport solutions.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Conspiracy theories around 5G technology have reached South Africa. Similar scenes to those witnessed in the UK have been reported in the country's KwaZulu-Natal province recently, where 2 new 5G towers were torched. Some people have been falsely claiming that 5G technology is causing the rapid spread of the coronavirus. Sumitra Naidu tells us more about the conspiracy.
Videos of the towers burnt made the rounds on social media recently, causing fear and panic amongst people already worried about the spread of COVID.
One of the reasons why people think that way is because COVID came to the world in 2019, and 5G rollout also started in 2019. These two things are correlated, they are not causal. So there is no causal relationship between 5G, which is electromagnetic waves, to COVID-19, which is a virus. Electromagnetic waves simply do not cause a virus.
Government has been slow to take action, but the ANC councillor involved in spreading his thoughts of a possible link was called to order. It was too late, though, for the 2 towers belonging to Vodacom and MTN.
The reason that the SACF is responding on the issue in terms of our members is because this is an industry issue. This is not specific to any single operator. We are all aware that the towers of some operators were torched. There's absolutely no link between COVID-19 and 5G. We think that it's really a lack of knowledge, which is what has resulted in people buying into conspiracy theories.
The regulator, too, has discredited claims of any link between 5G and COVID-19 and is appealing to citizens not to believe these theories that have no scientific evidence.
ICASA obviously has been monitoring what has been happening out there with regards to all these conspiracy theories about 5G network causing diseases or ailments such as COVID-19. As the authority, we believe that this is not true and it's not based on any science or any research. These are just conspiracy theories. We have filed the 5G network by giving it to some of the industry players. They applied for just to test the 5G network way before the novel coronavirus. These tests have been happening for the past couple of years, and we have received reports to that effect.
5G is already being rolled out in some parts of the country. South Africans are eager to gain access to faster speeds. A few companies have also applied for spectrum, which will enhance internet speeds even further and clear up congestion. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And in West Africa, Nigeria has rolled out a program that will empower 160,000 rural women across the nation with grants of $50. As Kelechi Emekalam reports, the government-assisted plan seeks to cushion vulnerable families from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and the related economic downturn.
Helen Thomas earns less than $3 daily from frying yam, bean cake and potatoes in Jahi, a community in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. It's the only income available to her family of 5. Helen was forced to close down her corner shop following the COVID-19 lockdown. Her husband, too, lost his job. The government is set to disburse $50 each to thousands of women like her. It's a chance to boost her current output.
I buy on credit. The following day after I sell, I give them so that they will give it to me again. Since I started this business, no money have come in cash that is up to 20,000 in my hand. So I believe if that 20,000 naira enter cash like this, I can buy yam, I can buy maybe 5 module of beans, keep. I can buy ororo and keep. I know that one will not solve everything, but I know it will reduce all this credit.
Nigerian women are among the most vulnerable group. The International Labour Organization estimates that the ratio of men to women employment is over 82%. Targeting women in poor communities is seen as a welcome development. But how much impact would it have on the larger economy?
For such grants to be going to women this time is very welcome, because these are the
that's the section, this particular section of the population that will always provide food for the children. It's not going to impact the economy at all because of the number. The number, 100 and something thousand, will not, it's not even up to 1% of the population of women. So it's not going to impact the economy at all. For such thing to impact the economy, every so-called rural woman should be able to have an amount, not less than 10,000, but with the amount of money mentioned and the number of women it should reach, economy won't even know such money was spent putting into it.
Among other things, the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted millions of livelihoods, food security and businesses. Government's been assisting individuals, micro, small and medium-scale enterprises get back on their feet again. Ultimately, the goal is to give citizens the spending power that would help boost the nation's fragile economy. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
The African startup space has shown great resilience during the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the successful startups is a Tunisian firm that seeks to sort out the mess in public urban transport through technology. Its online app has helped move transport services for millions of users. Here is CGTN's Aden Chauchi.
The Bus Software startup is offering a real-time solution for urban transport operations. It aims to solve several problems which directly impact the quality of service for millions of travelers in Tunisia and Africa.
The first problem is manual ticketing, which involves a considerable loss of time and money. The second one is the lack of real-time statistics, which makes decision-making difficult. The third problem is the lack of access to real-time information for users, and finally the lack of dynamic management and planning of public transport division.
The Bus Software co-founder, Makram Erges, dissolved his IT company and joined the Sahel Transport Company as an ordinary worker 4 years ago. He worked for the public enterprise for 2 years to learn the tricks of this field. Makram understood the problems of the transport sector, then resigned to start the Bus Software adventure.
We've developed this digital platform which collects all data from the bus in real time. When data synchronization takes place, the managers can know the exact location of the bus. They see it on the map and collect information about the transport controller's whereabouts, the bus speed, the revenue, the exact number of users like students, soldiers and policemen.
The Tunisian researchers are also using artificial intelligence in the Winica service. In recent times, AI has become increasingly useful in creating opportunities to make public transport safer, more reliable and more efficient.
Artificial intelligence allows for the self-planning of buses. This is how the transport company can offer optimal service for users.
According to a recent study published by the Consumer Protection Association, Tunisian users are very disappointed with the punctuality of bus service and inability of the public and private operators to provide a timetable for the operation schedules. In fact, the reliability provided by the Transport Department does not meet the expectations of passengers.
The founders of the Bus Software startup specialized in the smart transport field assert that their mission is to put a smile back on the faces of public transport users. The company plans to operate in several African countries in the next 2 years. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
The Egyptian government and the European Investment Bank have signed a $1.4 billion agreement to rehabilitate and expand metro and light rail lines in the cities of Cairo and Alexandria. The EIB funds will be issued in 2 tranches and will support the development of 3 projects in the 2 cities. From Cairo, here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim.
The €1.13 billion loan from the European Investment Bank will help upgrade and extend 2 tram lines in the city of Alexandria and develop an underground metro line in the capital Cairo. It's part of a comprehensive project to develop the railway system in the North African country.
To depend on vehicles or road transport of people and goods costs a lot of hard currency, as it leads to increased importation of fuel. It pollutes the air, affects our health and causes traffic jams. The upgraded railway transport system is based on clean energy, it's good for the environment and is a cheaper source of energy.
Statistics show that about 1.5 million people use trains daily, and 2 million others use the underground. Those figures will more than double after the upgrade, relieving the pressure of streets and roads. This ambitious project is costly. However, Cairo has been receiving financial support from several international organizations, such as the European International Bank.
The transport sector, the infrastructure sector as a whole, is currently the leading force for the Egyptian economy. So any smart investment here should be in infrastructure, building new roads, transport systems, clean energy, and more.
Egypt has already received the first tranche of 600 million euros from the EIB to begin work on the projects. The rest of the funds from the 1.13 billion euros loan are expected in the first quarter of the year. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. CAF bans Football Kenya Federation CEO for withholding the national team's COVID-19 results. And champions Morocco